Welcome to another evening of frank conversation here on Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. I'm Maokpe Ogun Yusuf. Now, a lot has been happening within the security space in the country this week, with stories of abduction rending the air. Thankfully, a few rescues have been recorded, but security agencies know they need to buckle up to restore the confidence of the people in the ability to protect them. Well, among other matters on the table of those who lead us is the fight against corruption. The past administration of President Muhammadu Buhari had it as one of its cardinal points, but the jury is still out on how he fared on that score. Meanwhile, the newly appointed czar of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the EFCC, convened a very interesting national dialogue here in the FCT. The dialogue was themed Youth, Religion, and the Fight Against Corruption. And my chairman, Dr. John Momo, chairman and chief executive officer of Channels Television, was a guest lecturer. There were quite an array of guests, including the president, who was represented by Vice President Kashim Shettima. On Hard Copy tonight, I speak with one of the invited panelists at that event, Professor Okey Ikechukwu, who is the executive director of Development Specs Academy, asking if it's still possible to make progress with the fight against corruption. Professor Okey Ikechukwu, welcome to Hard Copy.
Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know what you made of when you received that invitation from the EFCC to another national dialogue. I don't know. Did you go there with optimism, or did you go, here we go again, another talk show?
Actually, I went with some optimism for very clear reasons. This is the first real attempt to do a comprehensive, multi-stakeholder engagement on corruption. Now, it's different from inviting somebody to come and give a talk who will come, define corruption, tell you it's not good for the economy, it's not good for national development, in other words, tell us all that we know. But the EFCC wasn't just convening a conversation on corruption. They took time to look at both the efforts of the organizations and the condition of the Nigerian state, and came to the conclusion that fighting corruption must begin at the level of values. If I have the right values about financial management, if I have the right values about development and impact of my behavior, it will actually make me know what to do or what not to do.
It's interesting that that's where they're coming from, because was it just last week, the National Orientation is it commission now? Agency, NOA, yes. It released a charter of values. I think the Minister of Information has been speaking quite a bit about that. So it is interesting that the EFCC is approaching this from the area of values. But I'm looking at the theme, youth, religion, and the fight against corruption. I don't know why young people and religion are in the same breath, yes.
But before that, we also, Development Specs Academy, has been, NIPR, Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, has partnered our organization because we are running a national rebirth program. And that rebirth is an acronym for Reinventing the Essence, among other things. But that's the acronym. And the whole idea is to impart values not by powerful motivational talk, but to go to the centers of value and work with those who are there, teachers, etc. But on your substantive question, that theme chosen by EFCC, youth, religion, yes. Every person, one way or another, belongs to some religion. And religion is about behaving in a certain way according to how God wants us to behave. So, strictly speaking, religious values ought to represent the highest values for human beings. That's for anyone who doesn't believe that life is just about the physical body. Now, EFCC, adopting a multi-stakeholder approach, prepared a document on interdenominational, interreligious literature that could reinforce the same values from both sides, but targeting those to whom the future belongs. You know, it's one thing for me to preach in my church. It's another thing for what I'm saying in the church to be reinforced by National Orientation Agency, EFCC, actual curriculum in school. So you can see it's a wide stakeholder approach. The whole youth thing is not to put their name there in order to sound nice, but to get them to realize that, and the position emerged in the course of that conference, because my submission was that The youth of a nation is like a receptacle. What you pour into it is what it will contain. So if at an early stage you begin to put in the right values, they will understand that corruption is just stealing money. It is first of all a distortion of values. So if I'm working in a place, you've made a pot of soup, I come and add sand to it. I've corrupted the soup. In our use of language, you say, oh, don't corrupt the youths, which means don't teach them the values that will not make them upright. So here, they are to get first. We are to re-emphasize the actual concept of corruption, then move from the real meaning of corruption, which is damaged values or damaging of values, to financial corruption, economic corruption, the preponderance of cybercrime. For me to come and use my cyber security capacity to defraud you, it must mean that the only thing I worship is the money I can make from you. It must mean that all other values I have, I've put them away, and that cannot be right. So this form of engagement, where the education, this national educational curriculum, begins to incorporate within it lessons about what it means to be corrupt, about what kind of values lead to development that will sustain the 21st century, is a novel engagement.
So
that's what
when they're thinking youth now, they're thinking people still in secondary school, perhaps. Maybe not necessarily university. Because I'm looking at the fact that corruption has been with us for as long as we can, for as long as I can remember. And, well, I can say I'm no longer a spring chicken, but that's for how long we've been talking about corruption. And oftentimes people will say, we should be talking about people learning by example. Young people should learn from example. Cybercrime has now been with us, for many years. There was a young man, but he's now a professor, who wrote a book, Paradise for Maggots. I don't know if you ever came across it.
I heard about it, but I've not read
it was a book written about the first time the EFCC was formed under Nuhu Ribadu, and the fight against corruption. A lot of people who did cybercrimes then, popularly called 419, were documented in that book. A number of them were said to have found their way into the hallowed chambers of the National Assembly in the Fourth Republic, in the advent of the Fourth Republic, because they were the ones they were people of means at that time. So as a country, if we have rewarded by our actions or inactions, the rewards, the proceeds, or let's say we rewarded people who have participated in these things, haven't we nullified whatever values it is we're trying to instill in young people who have now found cybercrime lucrative?
No, we have not. At some point in the history of a nation and a people, misconduct may dominate and may appear to be attractive. An intervention could come and it will make a difference. If you recall, in 1966, the military took over. Gowon was head of state. The military government went on until 1976. It was overthrown by another set of soldiers, if you remember. And part of the reason was that the original ideals that made them take over government had been violated because many of the officers had become corrupt. Even the then head of state, who was sworn in, reports indicate that he personally returned much of what he knew he did not deserve, which he didn't get by the right means. So if you're to look at it at the time that there's corruption, and we take it, it's gone so bad that there's nothing to do. No, leadership can always make a difference. Direction giving can always make a difference. If my children are behaving badly and it's dominated the family, new rules can bring about a change. So it's not about throwing up the upper hands, no. Young people are going into cybercrime. But do you see, you mentioned the society. Was it EFCC that elected those cybercrime personalities of the past? It was their community. So we must also ask, what are the pillars of value in every community in Nigeria and every community all over the world? The family, the teachers, the schools, the religious leaders, the traditional rulers. These are the people who voted. So the question then is, what has led to the damage to the extent that even the pillars of value are incapable of restraining the citizenry? So it's not the nation that's lost. If you have a leader who introduces something different, when Murtala came, many knew his history, but they say, the man has turned a new leaf. They began to behave differently. And so the point I'm making here being, We cannot say it is totally overwhelming. It's soaked through the society. And like you correctly observed, many people who are in the highest positions in the land have a question mark against their names in that regard. To the extent that that is happening, to that extent must we also know and sense the need to begin to reverse matters where it matters the most. Public announcements have been the approach. Public events, National Summit on Corruption. Who are those who will go there? Important people, many of whom are responsible for the problem they've come to address. Who will be in the audience? People of the same caliber. The Nigerian is not part of the conversation. If you want to bring in the youth, you call National Association of Nigerian Students, or you call National Youth Movement. Go and check those organizations, particularly NANs, and ask yourself, has there been a non-president in the last 25, 30 years who is actually a student? You've graduated, you're living your life, you're working with politicians, and so you go to a university and get registered for a PGD and get an ID card. You're actually a businessman. So those platforms also have been violated. Now, if part of the content of the national education system, which is the human capital development factory, makes conscious intervention from the angle of this, not just the subjects, not just civics. Imagine you were in secondary school at a point, I was in secondary school at a point. What do you think will be the effect of a narrative on corruption, where you present to young people with active imagination that, look, I was given this money to tar this road, I didn't. And this is the road, this is how it's gone bad, it's not been repaired for 5 years. Now, on that road of 180 kilometers, see the number of people who have died in 5 years. You know the effect that will have. University students, the same thing. So they begin to think of consequences, not the announcement of stealing. And that becomes for them a frightening reality that will reinforce what the churches are teaching. My friend, you go to hell, or you won't have it nice. Look, by taking this money, I could actually prevent them from building a hospital that could take 1,000 lives. No, sorry, I will correct myself.
Exactly.
Religious organizations.
Interesting.
And their own angle.
It's an interesting thing that you say religious organizations, because at that same event was when the EFCC chairman...
Yes, I was going to migrate to that.
Yeah, really, that a religious sect was responsible for helping to launder about 7 billion.
7 billion. And not only that, the EFCC wrote them, they went and got a court injunction. And now that takes us to the second level of the conversation. You're told that the dress does not make the imam, and the hood does not make the monk. A sultan doesn't make me a priest. It's what I really am. Now you and I know that many of the religious organizations that call themselves Christian organizations, given the kind of Christianity I was taught as a child, and which I still believe in, if our Lord Jesus Christ was to come back here, he will be asking, sorry, what do they believe in? Because he will know there's no connection between their teaching and his own. Prosperity, there's nothing wrong. We are told man shall not live by bread alone, which means you need some bread. But he said, give us this day. After you have started by saying, pledging to live according to his will. So if you're not living according to his will and you're taking my bread, that is criminality. So bringing it all together, it also then imposes on everybody, including the EFCC, the responsibility of reaffirming values. Not every religious platform is serving religious purposes. If I'm a preacher and I tell you that it doesn't matter how you got your money, but that once you come and I bless it, the Almighty will be happy with you, that's blasphemy. So here you see a whole of society, transformation about at the level of understanding. So it's in that sense, because you and I know that the greater part of the problem, some of the social problem the young people have, is the preaching of some religious, popular religious personalities, where the disposition to work is being replaced by, don't worry, just say prayer, something will happen. Where you see a congregation or retreat and they're told, raise your phones. If you have enough faith, and Allah will come in there giving you some money, just name your bank. Now, how do you get those people to see any connection between work and income? Now, religion in that sense is also damaging a lot of people. And that means that part of what must develop further from this is religious and ethnic tolerance.
Well, Prof, you've talked about, did you say ethnic tolerance?
Religious and ethnic tolerance must be part of this, yes.
Yes, I'm not saying, I don't quite see the link between that and the fight against corruption. I mean, if we're talking politics, for instance, yes, I can see the link, but how do you link that with the fight against corruption?
Simple. If you realize that your religion, when you look at the fundamentals, every religion, okay, let's take the dominant one, Christianity and Islam, they believe that the body is not the human being, that there's a soul inside. They believe that how you behave determines your fate after this life. If you want it to be good, you shouldn't be doing bad things. So there's a connection. And corruption, which is both morally and legally wrong, is also what you shouldn't do. That's a connection. But then what if I do all of that and I regard a member of any person who is not from my religion as a bad person, or as somebody I must not work with, or somebody I must not promote? That is corruption. I'm supposed to use his capacity or her capacity to promote her. So you find that you're then moved on to ask yourself, okay, what if my parents were not Christians? Would I be discriminated against this Muslim? What if my parents were Muslims? Actually be a Muslim myself. It makes you to pause. I haven't read his Quran, he hasn't read my Bibles, and I'm saying his own is wrong. How do I know? I don't. You then find that there's a strong basis. It's both of us believe in God and we're struggling. My belief may be wrong. When you observe my attitude, you say, somebody who believes in the Almighty can behave like this. Then we retain the values that religion gives us and translate our behavior outside the domain of religion into that of people we can see to be trying to live according to the will of God as they understand. So religious tolerance becomes a manifestation of your realization and admission that if the Lord had wanted us to be all the same, we don't have made Asians or Japanese or any other thing. So you see, it comes in. It then also makes you realize that the fact that you're from my ethnic group or my religion doesn't remove the fact that what you did is wrong. And therefore, I cannot on the basis of religion conceal evil because my religion doesn't approve evil. So I migrate my consciousness to the platform of objectivity. I am Muslim. I am from Katsina State. My favorite food, miyan kuka, is the same for you. But it happens that some things you're doing don't agree with me. And it falls within the domain of legality. And I take it there. So you see that the understanding that this other guy is just another human being like me, but with a different geographical and cultural history. The effect on corruption and fighting corruption will then be in the form of, no, what is going on now? Leave him, he's our own thief. So if somebody is picked up for corruption or criminal activities, people from his area will say, no, let him be. Your culture, does it approve what he's doing? So you see that attitude has arisen because loyalty to the Nigerian state no longer exists. Mm-hmm. You now have indigenes and non-citizens. You now have a preponderance of persons and groups in the country who are only looking for what they can grab in economic terms. So there's no loyalty to the Nigerian state. And the suspicion and hope in this endeavor is that by the time you begin once again to make people human beings and citizens, the number of those who will aid corruption by being parochial will keep declining. Will it happen immediately? No. Can it happen immediately? No. Will it take time? Yes. Is it important to start? Yes. That's where we are.
Okay, well, I mean, certainly the journey of 1,000 miles, they say, begins with one step. But
provided you're heading in the right direction.
That caveat is also very, very important. How do we begin to, will I say, reinvigorate or to, put back
faith
and confidence in our young people, especially through processes such as what the Nigerian state itself, says it wants to do?
The first thing is for the young people to realize that they are alive. They are not part of the furniture. They cannot sit and wait for the faith to be put into them. They should also be observing that in the rot, there are one or two things on which faith can be put. And if things were like that are to grow stronger, it would help.
Like what?
I'm coming to that. Cuba was changed by, what's his name, Fidel Castro. How many were there? 9. Totally rotten nation. People were being sold drugs everywhere. It was a laughable thing. If anybody had said that Cuba had hope, they were young. Look at all the revolutions. You see, we have too large a population of our young whose intervention is lamentational. They are telling, we know what is wrong, but what are you doing in the small space you are? Now you move it to the elections. Recall that before the last elections, I was one of those who was particularly optimistic about the likely objective outcome, given the instrumentality of INEC's new techniques and storytelling. I was one of the most disappointed, not because of the outcome, but because the technology became irrelevant. Now, the faith of our young ones was raised and wasn't just dashed, but was pushed below the ground. Total disappointment. So for this coming election, I hope it will go well, but my optimism is in abeyance because the shock of the disruption of the last one was very comprehensive. INEC also did not give any cogent and clear explanations and all of that. In my view, INEC, and I still believe it should come back and will come back, remains, in my view, scandalized, without dignity, and under obligation to prove its mettle. Now, 2 incidents. Last November, I was guest speaker at the World Entrepreneurship Day, organized by University of Abuja, for young entrepreneurs. The hall was full, probably a capacity of not less than 1,000 or 1,005. Many of them planning to start businesses. You see, that's what worries me about the young. Besides the complaints and the talk, they go and do nothing. Now, at that event, after the program, said, okay, look, and a lot of them were eager to register businesses. To register a business liability company will not cost you less than 40,000. So I made a few confirmations and calls. I said, okay, yes, they could help. So 100 people, the first 100 people to give their names, to have their companies registered free, or not less than 40, 50,000. As I'm talking to you, not one of them took advantage of it. Yesterday, Chairman CEO of Channels spoke at the event, spoke about entrepreneurship, spoke about the path for youths. And when the person who spoke, because on the upper podium was the young people, he was a youth corps, a serving corps member, we call them corpers. They had a consensus and he came to represent them. That, okay, look, what is government doing to create jobs for us? He didn't hear one word of the keynote address. And most of these young, and that's the painful thing, because I work very regularly and consistently with young people, and I'm not giving up on it because they are young. If you get impatient with them, what makes you an adult? But also see the challenge you're dealing with. They want results. Now, call them and say, okay, take a job. Many of them don't know how to function in an office, and they don't think they should be retooled because the educational system is damaged. That's not their fault. But we must realize that the youth we are trying to work with have themselves also been negatively mentored by the older generation. And that if any push comes to shove, the majority of them will go with the wrong guy. If 2 of us are contesting elections now, and we go to NYSC camp or to university, and we say we want people who will facilitate things for us in the wrong way, and I come to preach for those who will be good, who will even volunteer, there will not be anybody around me. That's the extent of the damage. But if we focus only on the damage, you say, well, please, you can't. Societies are not rebuilt because people got tired and angry. It's because people keep doing their instrumental interventions, others will keep keying in. Fine, the EFCC has done what it did. Let other organizations. For instance, the Ministry of Education should come out and partner with EFCC on this. Do you get it? And introduce the curriculum first in government unity schools. Not just introduce it the way the government introduced the intro tech. No, intro tech without intro tech teachers. A new course had been devised. It's like we come to your department and say, well, your university introduced methodology. There are no methodology lecturers. So you call somebody in chemistry to go and give a lecture. Now, imagine they do that and it becomes part of first, the unity schools. Then your partner state governments introduce, that is the work that needs to happen. And it can only be progressive gain. But I think because of how bad things have become, people will look at the mountain of wrong and say, please, we've had all of this before. Those who want to give up, they're welcome. But for as long as you're alive and you're satisfied with just living your life, going out and coming back, switching off and sleeping, you've deleted your numerical value from the forces leading to transformation. Nobody should do that to himself or herself. I won't do it to myself.
Well, on that note of encouragement, Prof, we have to say thank you for coming on Hard Copy tonight.
My pleasure.
Well, that's the program tonight. Your feedback will be welcome to the handles showing on your screen. I hope you've been encouraged. Thank you for watching. I'm Okey Yusuf. Good night.